What is up, guys? It's almost NFL season, so I figured I'd do a video breaking down how I make money betting on futures. So I'm not gonna lie, I don't bet on futures a ton, and there's a few different reasons. It's not because you can't get an edge on futures and make money. It's just, there's 162 MLB games every single year. As a simple example, there's tons of prop bets you can play every single night. Home runs, hits plus runs plus RBIs. There's not that many futures you can bet on. MVP, World Series winner. In the case of football, I guess it's Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, AFC Champion. But there's still not that many markets you can play. And another reason I don't bet on futures that much is it just you're tying up your money for a long time. So let's say you bet on the Super Bowl every single year and you have a 10% ROI. Awesome. Every single year you bet $1,000 on NFL futures. Every year you're making $100 in expected value, $100 in edge on your $1,000 total stake. That's not that great. If you're betting with a 5% edge on every NFL game over the course of a regular season, you're making a much higher ROI because, again, you're not tying your money up for as long of a period of time. However, futures are fun. You can get an edge. The math is a little bit complicated, but again, most people shouldn't bet on sports. If you don't want to dig into the math and the data side of sports betting, 97% of people lose money sports betting long term. So if you don't care about the math, the data side, you probably shouldn't be gambling in the first place. So you want to be especially careful with future bets because sportsbooks are known to charge more juice. The books bake in more profit margin to their futures bets compared to straight bets. So these are markets that you can lose a lot more money on because the sports books bake in higher vig on these multi-way futures markets. So what I'm gonna do in this video is I have a ton of NFL futures I'm gonna go through. I've locked in a bunch of different bets, but what I'm gonna take you through is the math behind Bills plus 750, which is a play I just locked in on FanDuel. I was browsing odds on OddsJam, and I saw the Bills were offered at plus 750 on FanDuel, which looks pretty good, right? Circa, which is known to be a pretty sharp sports book, they're only giving you the Bills at plus 600, so FanDuel clearly seems like an outlier in the market. But what I wanted to do in this video is run through a few different reasons, the math, the data side, and show you why this bet is mathematically profitable or plus EV. So I hope you guys are ready to nerd out a bit. Without further ado, let's get into it. If you like this type of content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment any other questions you have. Also, let me know other video ideas that you guys want to see. I love making sports betting content. So, hopefully this strategy that I go through helps make you a ton of money betting on futures. Let's get into it. So let's get into the math and why I have high confidence in this play having an edge and a mathematical advantage, why I really like it. And there's a few things I want to mention is if the odds on the Bills change, obviously don't bet it. If FanDuel corrects their pricing and they bring the Bills down to plus 600, don't bet it. You can reach out to me for other suggestions. And you can also just obviously internalize the math, the strategies we go through, and go apply them on your own. But the first reason I like this play is it's a crossed market. I have made a full video about crossed market positive EV betting and why it is the most profitable sports betting strategy that also gives you the highest confidence in your edge. So basically, all sportsbooks set their own odds. You just saw that for the Super Bowl prices. FanDuel has the Bills plus 750. DraftKings is only plus 600. What sucks about most sportsbooks is 95% of sportsbooks only offer one-way markets. So you can only bet on a team to win the Super Bowl. You can't bet on them to not win. However, Novig, which is a peer-to-peer betting exchange, it's legal in basically every state. It's a really sharp book because there's no limits. So a lot of syndicates and sharp bettors love to bet on Novig because, again, they never get their action cut down. But on FanDuel, we're getting the Bills plus 750. On Novig, the Bills to not win the Super Bowl was minus 706 odds. So this is a crossed market, right? And what that means is it's arbitrage. You could bet, I bet $1,000 on the Bills plus 750. I could go over to Novig and hedge that. Granted, you'd need a lot of money to hedge. I could bet a lot of money on Novig on the Bills at minus 706 to not win the Super Bowl and make a risk-free profit of a little over $50. So long story short, one of these two plays has to be profitable by definition. Whenever arbitrage exists, which is why, it's such a great strategy, is you have a very high confidence in your edge. Whenever two books are so out of sync that you can bet equal and opposite outcomes to make a risk-free profit. In this example, it's Bills to win the Super Bowl, Bills to not win the Super Bowl on two different books to make a risk-free profit. One of those two plays has to be profitable. One of those plays has to have a mathematical advantage, either them to win on FanDuel at plus 750 or not win at minus 706 on Novig. So I'll give you another kind of simple example of arbitrage. Is here, you can see for this random NFL preseason game, FanDuel was super out of sync with other books, right? Panthers plus 3.5 was plus 107 on Rebet, which is a sports book that's legal in nearly every state. On FanDuel, Panthers plus 3.5 was plus 146. So these two books were so out of sync, you could bet Steelers minus 3.5 on Rebet. And on the opposite side, you could take Panthers plus 3.5 on FanDuel at plus 146 to make a risk-free profit. So to make the math a little bit simple, let's say you bet on FanDuel 1370, right? On Rebet, you bet 1370 at minus 137 odds on the Steelers minus 3.5. So you're betting 1370 to win 1,000 in profit. What the arbitrage calculator is gonna do is it's gonna tell you the exact amount to bet on FanDuel to guarantee a risk-free profit. In this case, it's 963.41, but I always recommend when you're arbitrage betting or in general, you don't wanna sketch out the sports books, round down to like 960. So basically there's two outcomes, right? The Steelers cover or the Panthers cover. So if the Steelers cover, on Rebet, we win 1,000. On FanDuel, I recommend round your bet size to 960. You lose 960, so you're up 40 in profit. That's one outcome. The second outcome is the Panthers cover. And if the Panthers cover, you lose 1370, right? You're losing 1370 on Rebet. That's what you bet on Steelers minus 3.5. But on FanDuel, you're profiting 1401.60, and you can see the math on the screen right here. So your net profit would be 3160. Again, the numbers are a little different than what the arbitrage calculator is showing you because, again, we decided to round the bet size on FanDuel to not sketch out the sports books. So basically, if I could play both of these plays in the proper proportion to guarantee a profit, one of those two bets has to be profitable. Either Panthers plus 3.5, and if you look at the other data point you have in the market, Novig's only offering this at plus 117. It seems like FanDuel's the side with value, but one of those two plays has to be profitable. And what I'm gonna get into next is kind of how you can devig multi-way markets. So the Super Bowl, obviously, for most games you're betting on, you're betting on two-way markets. That's what they're called, right? You're betting on, just as a simple example, you're betting on the Commanders to win or the Giants to win. That's it. The Commanders are gonna win or the Giants are gonna win. That's a two-way market. However, for futures are in general multi-way markets, right? There's a bunch of teams who could win the Super Bowl. It's not just two. Same thing for Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, AFC Champion. Almost all futures are multi-way markets, which makes the math of determining fair value a little bit more complicated, which is exactly what I'm gonna show you how to do. It requires some spreadsheets, some math, stuff like that. So I hope you guys are ready to nerd out. So aside from looking for crossed markets, you can also devig multi-way markets, so remove the juice. Again, as I said earlier, futures have much higher vig compared to traditional straight bets. However, you can still make some money. So again, Devigging, a two-way market. So this is a two-way market, right? This fight is going over or under. There's no other outcomes, right? The fight goes over or under. On FanDuel, we're buying this at -120. All the other books, including sharp books like Bet Online, have this at -145. So you can simply use a no vig calculator. Most important calculator in sports betting, removes the juice or the vig from a two-way market. So basically, if I devig Bet Online's market, they have the over at -145. It's like buying a stock at 120 when the other sharper books have this priced around 140. You're getting value in the market. Every book is a data point. So Bet Online has 30 cents of juice. If you remove the vig or the juice, the fair price on the over, the favorite outcome, would be -127. We're getting -120 on FanDuel. So this bet is plus EV. So what I can actually do is just bet this real quick. Why not, right? So I'll throw a little bit on it. Why not? We got to fight for tonight. However, for multi-way markets, it's much more complicated. So basically what you need to do is you need to convert every single odd first into an implied probability. And again, I'll include a sheet in the description. So basically, as an example, on DraftKings, they're giving you the Bills at +600. So that's a 6-to-1 underdog, right? That's a 6-to-1 underdog. They're going to win the Super Bowl 1 out of 7 times. That's the price DraftKings is giving you, right? 6-to-1 underdog. So the Bills need to be greater than a 1 out of 7 chance. And if you just go to an odds converter calculator, +600, right, means a 14.29% chance. So basically, if the Bills are 20% to win the Super Bowl, then betting them at +600 would be a profitable bet. If they're 10% to win the Super Bowl, betting them at +600 would be an unprofitable bet. This is your break-even win probability. So what you can do is you can convert the odds into implied probabilities, and this should sum to 1, right? Like one of these teams has to win the Super Bowl. So in a fair betting market where there's no juice, no vig, the sum of these probabilities would be 1. However, obviously here it's not going to be 1. So for example, if I just sum up Circa, they're currently, if you sum up the probability of each team winning the Super Bowl, it would be 120%, which obviously isn't possible. Right? Like that's because of the juice they're baking in. So what you need to do is you need to normalize this to 1%. You need to divide all of these probabilities by 1.2 if you're devigging to Circa. On the other hand, on DraftKings, it's 120% as well. So they're charging roughly the same amount of juice as Circa. What about FanDuel? FanDuel's 1.22%, so an even higher implied probability. So Pinnacle's charging the least juice, right? It only sums up to 1.16. The higher that number gets, the more juice is being baked into the market. Again, in a fair market with no vig, this sums to 1. Because again, if you have the perfect probability for each team winning the Super Bowl, one of these teams has to win the Super Bowl, it has to sum to 1. So what you can do is you can just normalize these numbers. So again, on DraftKings, it's currently 120% or 1.2. So what you need to do to figure out the fair probability of each team winning the Super Bowl is just divide their implied probability from the odds by 1.2, by the exact sum of the implied probabilities. You can see the formula right here, which comes out to 12%. And then you can convert that back into odds. So basically, Novig isn't a great book to look at, to be honest, as a betting exchange when you're devigging a multi-way market for a bunch of different reasons. But regardless, that's not really the point. Is DraftKings and Circa, if you devig the market, right, they were initially giving you the Bills at +600. But again, that's their market with juice. So what we're doing is we're removing the juice. We're devigging the market. So if you devig the market, what you'll see is the Bills are fair, have a true line of around +742. We're getting +750 on FanDuel. That's where I bet the Bills. So if I just go here, show you guys I actually bet this, I think it has value, right? We're getting plus 750, which is above fair value, above plus 742, plus 743. So this bet is profitable to DraftKings and Circa's market. Circa is known to be a sharp book as well. However, this bet on the Bills plus 750 would be negative EV to Pinnacle's market. Pinnacle comes out to plus 790. And that should make sense considering, right? DraftKings and Circa, we're getting plus 750 on FanDuel, 150 cents of improvement. Pinnacle was giving you plus, 662. So we're only getting 88 cents of improvement. So once you devig Pinnacle's market, this bet on FanDuel actually still looks like it's negative EV. But I think Circa, as well as the fact that, Bills was crossed with no vig, as we kind of went through earlier, is powerful enough to show the real edge. So even though it's a little negative EV to Pinnacle's market, it's plus EV to DraftKings and Circa's market, I still think this is a great bet. So this is basically how you devig futures multi-way markets. And we kind of went through everything you need to know to bet on futures. This sheet will be in the description, and email me with any questions.